This is a story about a secret underground that saved Allied lives during World War II. Elmer Bendiner was a navigator aboard one of those big 4-engine B-17 bombers known as Flying Fortresses, and he remembers a particular bombing run over the German city of Kassel. His B-17, the Tondaleo, was being barraged by flak from the Nazi anti-aircraft guns, and that was not at all unusual. But on this particular occasion, their gas tanks were hit. Later, as Elmer reflected on the miracle of a 20-millimeter shell piercing the fuel tank without touching off an explosion, his pilot told him it was not quite that simple. On the morning following the raid, the pilot had gone down to ask the crew chief for that shell as a souvenir of unbelievable luck. The crew chief told the pilot it was not just one shell, but 11 shells had been found in the gas tanks. 11 unexploded shells, when only one would have been sufficient to blast them out of the sky. Elmer said, "It was as if the sea had been parted for us. Even after 35 years, so awesome an event leaves me shaken, especially after I heard the rest of the story from the pilot." He was told that the shells had been sent to the armorers to be defused. But the armorers told him that the intelligence division had come and taken the shells away. They could not say why at the time, but the pilot eventually sought out the answer. Apparently, when the armorers opened each one of those 11 shells, they found no explosive charges inside any of them. They were as clean as a whistle, and it's just about as dangerous. Empty? Well, no, not all of them. One of them contained a carefully rolled piece of paper. On it was a scrawl in Czechoslovakian. The intelligence people scoured the base for a man who could read Czech. Eventually, they found one who could decipher the note, and Elmer said in awe, "It set us marveling." Translated, the note read, "This is all we can do for you now." In this video, we'll see that we too have a secret ally who works behind the scenes on our behalf. Hi, I'm Jim Taylor. Welcome to In Favor Resources and to the 11th video in this teaching series, We Are an Army in Indiana. This is based on a prophecy by Chuck Pierce, and we are drawing points of comparison between armies in history, armies in Israel, armies in America, armies in Indiana, because what's true of those successful armies is true of us as well, if God sees us as an army. So take the handout that you can download at infavorresources.com. You're looking for the handout for video number 11. In Indiana, we have an awesome ally. Now, we already know that we obey the commander. We wear protective armor. We carry deadly weapons. We are trained and ready. We know who the enemy is. We know we're in a fight and on a battlefield. We raise our banner high and we employ divine strategies. This video, in Indiana, we have an awesome ally fighting on our behalf. Now, if we fought by ourselves or in our own strength, we would surely be lost. But God himself stands alongside us. He helps us. He comes to our aid. And this changes everything. God transforms a frail and fearful rabble into a mighty army. He turns certain defeat into triumphant victory, as these scriptures show. Look at your handout. 2 Chronicles 32. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of the king of Assyria and the vast army with him. There it is again. There is a greater power. There's a vast army, but there's a greater power with us than with him. With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people gain confidence from what Hezekiah said. 2 Chronicles 14. Asa called to the Lord his God and said, "Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against" what? "This vast army. Lord, you are God. Do not let mere mortals, no matter how many of them there are, prevail against you." And so the Lord struck down the Cushites. God promises in Isaiah 41, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I am the Lord your God who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear. I will help you. I will be your ally. And remember in Joshua 10, the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. And after an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw the opposing army into confusion before them, so Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. And as the enemy fled from Israel on the road, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them. What an ally! And more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. God played a huge part in the battle. The Israelite soldiers played a small part in the battle. They conclude, there has never been a day like it before or since. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. We Hoosiers are helped by a greater power than our own. Surely the Lord fights for Indiana. Prime Minister Winston Churchill said, there's at least one thing worse than fighting with allies, and that is to fight without them. And as always, there's a lot of wisdom in the music. The great Martin Luther said, a mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper, he, amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. Did we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. Were not the right man on our side, the man of God's own choosing. Donna Brooks from 3 o'clock session wrote, the strong right arm of the Lord is fighting my battles. Chris Tomlin wrote, you crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield. I know who goes before me. I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. Michael W. Smith, it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. Flip your handout over there. We've got space there, as always, for some thoughts and questions and application and implications about this phrase, we are an army in Indiana. Did you ever have someone come to your rescue when you were in great danger? If you did, it probably occurs to you right away. You remember that story. Or maybe someone helped you when you were in dire need. Well, how did you feel about them afterward? And do any of those emotions resurface now as you relive that story? Think of your favorite biblical stories where God controls the forces of nature to give aid to his people, like water from the rock and the feeding of the 5,000, and quail flying into the camp, and ravens feeding Elijah, and so on and so on. Well, what do those stories tell you about your God? And what do they have to say about your present circumstances and difficulties? Tell a story about a time when it was God himself who came to your aid in a timely fashion. How were you feeling just before he showed up? And then how were you feeling afterward? One more. Can you see any ways that God has come through for Indiana in its past? What about in its recent history? And name some of the ways that we need his help today. Next video, in Indiana, we are courageous and confident. Hope to see you then.